Hi friends and family. Today we're going to talk about how to manage your fantasy football team. We're going to review the kinds of things you need to do on a weekly basis to keep your team going, to do well in your matchups, and to hopefully get you into the playoffs at the end of the season. Alright, so everything we're going to talk about today basically falls under the category of check your team. So what do I mean by that? I mean look at your team. And you want to do that, ideally, you want to do that on Thursday before kickoff of the Thursday night game. You want to do it again on Sunday before the first game kicks off on Sunday. And you want to do it on Monday as well if you have players who are playing in the Monday night game. You want to check at least an hour before kickoff time. Many times that is the cutoff for making changes to your roster, so make sure you check before then. So what are you checking for? Hopefully when you check in with your team, it's back. Your team looks just like this. No red flags, no red symbols, everyone looks good to go. However, if you check your team and some of these symbols start appearing next to any of your players, then you might have trouble. Okay, so if there's an SSPD next to your player's name, that means that player's been suspended. So you definitely want to click on the box next to their name and find out all you can about that suspension. Sometimes players are just suspended for a game or two, and if they're a really good player, it might be worth your while just to move them to the bench and replace that player with someone that you already have on your bench. However, if that player has been suspended for the entire season, you're going to want to throw that player out into the pool of undrafted players and use the waiver wire to pick up a new player to take their place. So we have a whole other video going over the finer points of the waiver wire, so I'm not going to get into too much detail at this time. All I want to say is that anytime a player is going to be out for a very long time, or God forbid for the whole season, you're not going to want to leave them in your lineup, even on your bench. You're going to want to throw them back into the pool and get yourself a good quality player from the waiver wire and work them into your lineup. Okay. If there's a red box next to your player's name, that's not necessarily terrible news. It means that it's a little red flag. So basically something happened. Maybe the coach even made some disparaging comments about that player. You just kind of want to check and see what it is. Oftentimes there's no cause for alarm and you can leave that player in your lineup. Sometimes it's a hint that there might be trouble coming, and so it's a good heads up that you're going to have to check in with that player again over time. Just always, if there's a red box next to your player's name, click on the box, find out what's going on. The next few symbols appearing next to your player's name indicate problems. So if you see a PUP, that means physically unable to perform. That can be for a variety of reasons, including injury, or maybe they just failed to pass their physical, whatever. They're physically unable to perform. They're not going to play in that game. So you're going to have to replace them. Again, click on the box, figure out how long that's going to be the case, make a decision whether you're just going to bench them or whether you're going to use the waiver wire to replace them. O means out. Again, very bad news. They're not going to play that game. Click on the box, find out how long you're going to be out for, and make a decision about bench or replacement. IR, injured reserve. I think I also played on a platform where it was just I. Anyway, that's an injury. They're not going to play. So again, click on the box, find out how long that's going to be, make a decision, but at the very least you're going to have to replace them for this upcoming game. Q and P are not necessarily a disaster. So Q means questionable, so that means something's happened, but there's no good information about whether or not that person is going to play in the next game or not. Probable, again, means, yeah, something's happened, but this player is probably going to play. In either case, though, this is a player you have to keep your eye on. they could make a last-minute decision to pull that player from the starting lineup, and if you don't move that player out of your starting lineup, that's going to be a problem because you'll get 0 points for that player. So keep your eye on players that have Qs and Ps. You don't necessarily have to move them right out because they very well could play, but just keep your eye on them. Alright, so you're checking for injuries and related problems. Those are all indicated by either a red box or the red symbols next to your players' names. Another thing you're checking for is just to make sure that everyone is where you want them to be. So there's a saying in fantasy football, which is always start your studs. Your studs are the people that you've drafted in the first half of the draft. They're the most highly ranked players. Usually it's your quarterback, your wide receivers, and your starting lineup, and your starting running backs. Sometimes you might have an elite tight end who's a stud. There's about 3 or 4 of them in the league right now. And then the players that you drafted later are a little more flexible. For the first few weeks, for the most part, in these positions up top, you're going to start the players that you drafted, barring injury or other unfortunate and unexpected events. Once you get down to your flex position, this is usually a player that you've drafted later in the draft, and you might have comparable players down here on your bench, and so you can definitely play the matchups. Sometimes players are ranked more highly in certain weeks because, for many reasons, including they might be playing a terrible team. And so, by all means, if it's a favorable matchup for someone down here and they're predicted to do well, you can move them into the flex spot. So for the first few weeks at least, stick with your studs for the most part. Play around with your flex. As the season goes on, bye weeks start week 4. By then you kind of know who's exploding down here, hopefully. You have a better sense of who's going to be underperforming up here. And then there's more kind of fluidity in who you're going to move into which position. And so that's kind of what I mean by making sure everyone's where you want them to be. So you're checking for injuries and other related problems. You are making sure everyone is where you want them to be. And probably most frequently from week 4 on, you're checking for bye weeks. So stay on top of your bye weeks, particularly when you have a particular bye week where maybe you have a lot of players who are going to be out in the bye. Make sure you know that you have a replacement for all those players. You have probably several positions on your team that you don't have a backup for. You might not have a backup quarterback. You might not have a backup tight end. Your defense and your kicker you shouldn't have backups of. And so you kind of want to start planning a little bit ahead when they have bye weeks coming up, figuring out what you're going to do. For example, if your quarterback's about to go out on a bye week, maybe even in 2 or 3 weeks, you have somebody who's really doing nothing down on the bench, like they're not getting any points. You're looking at them week after week and they haven't really performed at all. But you kind of know that there's a quarterback out there in the pool of free agents that you would like to replace your quarterback during his bye week. By all means, a couple weeks ahead of time even, go ahead and pick up that replacement quarterback. Get rid of the underperformer on your bench. Let that replacement quarterback sit down there until the bye week. All I'm trying to say is plan ahead for your bye weeks. Alright, I want to say one more thing about Monday night players. When you have players on your team who are going to be playing in the Monday night games, pay special attention to them. If there's a Q or a P next to their name, have a backup plan. Happens all the time that a player who's questionable, right at the last minute, they'll kind of decide that that player's not going to participate. Not such a big deal on Sunday because chances are you have a good replacement on your bench. By the time the Monday game comes around, all your players that played on Thursday night, all those Sunday players are no longer eligible to replace a Monday player who's out at the last minute. So if you have somebody in your Monday night lineup who's questionable or even probable, you definitely want to have a backup plan. This happened to me last year. I had a tight end who had a probable next to his name, totally expected him to play, and then seriously, at the very last minute, they announced that he wasn't going to play. It was a Monday night game. I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, it was a tight end. Fortunately, the tight end for the opposing team happened to be available out there in free agency, and I was lucky enough to be able to pick him up at the last minute and slide him into my lineup. So I lucked out. It's not always going to be the case that that's possible. So if you have Monday night players who are questionable, even probable, have a backup plan in mind for what you're going to do if they're out. All right, so that's it. That's your basic team maintenance. Check your team. You're checking for injuries. You're checking that everyone's where you want them to be. The people that are going to get you the most points are in your starting lineup. And you're going to check and make sure you don't have to move anyone around due to bye weeks. So that's it. Easy, easy. And listen, I just want to go over the reason why your team maintenance is so important. When you signed up for your league, basically you gave your agreement to, at the very least, to do this kind of maintenance. If you stop managing your team and you just let injured players and bye week players sit on your starting lineup, it's really not fun and it's not fair for everyone else in your league. Whoever's going up against your neglected team that week is definitely going to win. And it's really not fair to the other people in your league who are playing actual players that week. And it's not fun for the person who's going up against your team. It's not fun to play against somebody who's not even trying. So there's a very minimal amount of work that you kind of agreed to do, and just make sure you do it. That's it. Okay, so I won't see you again for a while. I think we've covered just about everything we need to cover. There is a video in the works for initiating trades with other members of your league. It's fun and important, so that'll be the next time you see me. In the meantime, hey, football season's about to begin, so have fun and good luck.